This is The Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.
Sherri Papini. This is a story of the mother who disappeared and then magically showed back up, claimed that two Hispanic women had abducted her, tortured her for days, even branded her. When she was found, she went back to her husband, rehabilitated, and they stayed together for several more years until the authorities finally put the pieces together and said, "We think you made it all up." And she did. And she went to prison. And now she's out. There's also a new documentary series out on Hulu called Perfect Wife, from the perspective of her former husband, Kevin Papini. And it's very, very fascinating to see it from his view and everything that he went through. Siobhan Scott, psychotherapist and author, joining us. I know you had a chance to take a look at that. What were some of your takeaways on that shocking documentary?
I was shocked by the degree of her self-inflicted injuries. And it was just, I had followed the case a bit, and I knew she came back bruised, and we heard about the brand. I was thinking something tiny, but those burns were huge on her back. And it really, to me, showed the depth of her personality disorder. Mm-hmm. We can talk. A lot of people have been saying, boy, she's crazy. So the question comes up, is she mentally ill?
Yes.
Mental illness is something that any of us, any normal person, can acquire mental illness. We can become depressed. We may, develop an anxiety disorder. People can have trauma, develop PTSD, but mental illness is something that any normal person can acquire. Mm-hmm. Personality disorder is who you are. And that means in early childhood, you developed in an aberrant way and you move through the world very differently from the rest of us. And so I can't officially diagnose her, of course, without meeting her, but I think we can say with a reasonable degree of certainty that this lady has some very, very severe cluster B personality disorders, which mean officially she's not crazy. She's logical in her thinking, goal-directed. She planned this for months. And to do this to your husband and your children is really, for those of us with normal personalities, something that we absolutely cannot fathom.
And that's a scary thing. Let me ask you this, because I want to talk more about the personality disorder in a second, but can you have the two on top of each other, where you have personality disorder and then mental illness on top of it as well? And are we dealing with that possibly here? I know you can't officially diagnose, but just from what you've seen.
Yeah, you certainly can. I have to say, though, I don't see any evidence of something like psychosis or major depressive disorder. So if she has a layered mental illness, it's not apparent in her behavior. But the personality disorder is glaring.
Is that because of the being cognizant of what she's doing? I mean, granted, it goes against the grain of everything that's sane, or that will be considered healthy or normal. Yeah. But it's calculated. It's as if in her
mind,
very
calculated.
What she is thinking, I'm assuming she's telling herself, and it's justified in her mind, as this is not wrong. This is an okay thing to do.
And that's the thing that makes it, appear that there is not officially mental illness, because of the planning, the degree of detail, the way that she went about this, planning it for months in advance with burner phones and the layers of deception. This was a sane person. She knew what her goal was, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah. I mean, something like this, let's go way back and talk more about the actual events when she was gone and those injuries and such. How would a personality disorder like this develop? Is this something that one can just simply be born with, and this is just kind of how your mind functions? Or is this something that would be more so kind of out of childhood, out of some sort of conditioning, out of some sort of abuse, things of that nature, that would lend it to this way of operating?
Yeah, we're all a combination of genetics, biology, and childhood experiences. With this kind of personality problem, this particular cluster B category, we do think that child abuse and or neglect has a lot to do with it. So you have somebody with some predisposition to vulnerabilities biologically, and then you put them in invalidating environment as children. Borderline is one of the categories that comes up along with histrionic and narcissistic, and they each have certain negative traits. And I think in this case, this person who would do something like this had the negative traits of all three of those disorders. This probably did have a lot to do with childhood upbringing.
Yeah, it seemed that, just on the surface, when you look at what her desires were, it was always for attention. It was always validation, trying to find validation. And quite often it seemed to really kind of focus on her appearance, if you will.
Yes.
And that's really what she kind of, I'm going to assume, and this is just my speculation, felt value in. And that seemed to be kind of it. There wasn't a lot of pride in anything else other than how she looks and her playing to the cameras of her wedding photos. They all look so beautiful and wonderful, but it's kind of one of those where you just look at the photos, even if you take the story out of it, you know nothing about it. I'd almost look at some of those photos and go, something not right there. Like they're just a little too perfect to be what they are.
The narcissism really did shine in her presentation to the world. And of course, the narcissist is very manipulative and will do anything to keep the attention going. And then when you throw in the histrionic characteristics, and a person that's a less common personality problem, fortunately, but the histrionic person will go big. They will go dramatic. They will go above and beyond and do almost anything, even negative things, to have the eyes on them all the time. And so there were certainly features of that too. And then with the borderline, there's an unstable sense of self. And that's a person who's never really developed much of a core identity, but they role play. And they can appear very, very different depending on their mood at the time. And so many people described her as, super mom and the perfect mom. Well, this was a role she was playing, and she got attention from that. But clearly, this was not a person who really cared about her children in a very deep way. It was all superficial.
It was all for, look at me, I'm a super mom, I'm a great mom. Give me the gratification of being this image that I want to be. I'm doing really good in this role. And then, it's almost like the second that that gratification goes away, it's almost like it's not there for some of these folks. I'm going to think it's like you have, it needs to be that constant feeding of the beast. And if it's not there, they got to find it somewhere.
They're a bottomless pit of need, and there's no self there if they're not getting this reflection back from an adoring public.
Sure. She went to such extreme, Sherri Papini, and it was just shocking what we learned in that documentary. She went to a former boyfriend's house. She planned all this out, and she had been communicating with this guy for quite some time, and he seemed to be a guy who would just, whatever you need, I am there for the hot girl. That seemed to be kind of what he was. And she went there and requested that he injure her to make it look as if she had been kidnapped. Like literally ran into hockey poles or sticks, had him shoot hockey pucks at her, had him go to the Hobby Lobby, get a wood cottering iron, and then brand her with the word Exodus in her back. And had stopped eating or ate very little. So she was emaciated by the time she came out of this, when she claimed that she had been abducted by the two Hispanic women and then dropped on the side of the highway. That's kind of extreme. That's just shocking that one would go to those lengths. I know you just explained a lot of it, but to go to those lengths of pain and suffering, and also watching your family search for you in a nationwide search. What on earth? How is someone like that justifying that to their twisted personality disordered self?
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of thinking going on beyond the need for the attention and this emotional gratification over watching the news and seeing, oh, there's her face plastered all over the country, on national news, and getting gratification from that. Clearly, there's no empathy for anyone else, and that goes back to the gaps in her personality. But yeah, it really is to an extreme. When I saw the photos of the injuries, I was just shocked. Because it gets into Munchausen territory.
Yeah.
And we know people with that disorder will do surgery on themselves, cut themselves open, and then stitch it up to try to look like they've had an operation and fool people. And these just extreme behaviors that, no normal person thinks that way. No normal person could inflict pain. The burning, my God. And these scars were big.
Yeah.
It's like, this is just somebody who's very aberrant in their way of thinking.
Does something like that, I mean, are they getting pleasure out of getting the pain, or is it more so I'm getting ready for the role, and being in the role is where the pleasure comes from? Because we hear about and people suffer from things where there's cutting and those sort of things that go on, and they're inflicting their own pain. But is that completely different than what we're talking about here in terms of how she got those injuries, and then how she operates and why she operated the way she did?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing for me to wrap my mind around, because I am, of course, am a person who hates blood tests. I do everything I can to avoid pain,
Yeah.
but clearly she has a high tolerance for it. And does she get a sense of euphoria or a high out of this? Or is it just, I'm willing to sacrifice and tolerate something that seems intolerable just because of the payoff here? And my guess is it's the latter. She's just so invested in the payoff.
Yeah, it's really shocking to see what she went to. Another point that was made in the documentary, we've talked about Munchausen a little bit here, but it almost looks like there might have been a little Munchausen by proxy going on as well. If you remember the documentary, there was several movies about it too, talking about Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard in Springfield, Missouri, several years ago. That's what an interesting case that was, and horrible as well. But we heard claims from Keith Papini, and I said Kevin earlier. I apologize for that, but Keith is his name, the husband, that she would have the children inhale rubbing alcohol, and didn't just stop there. She would then take tissues, soak them in rubbing alcohol, put them in plastic bags around the kids' necks so they would inhale the fumes before they went to the doctor's office, where she would take them, and then they would be ill at that point in time. Can you expand on that a little bit, on what's going on there?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing, but this person, this desperate for attention person who's trying to look like the doting mother, will sacrifice their children. And it reminded me very much of the Gypsy Rose story. And I'm just thankful that this culminated in her being away from her kids, because these kids were in danger from her. And it was just, it didn't surprise me in a way because of the extent of how she injured herself. This was just, taking it in another direction, but the same basic thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking that anyone would do that to their children. But again, it goes back to their prism and how they're looking at the world. They're not looking at it the same way. They are finding a way to justify these things and believe that they are in the right, and everyone else is in the wrong, which again, I think if you're not that person, it's so hard to wrap your mind around. Do you think that I mean, obviously we've just recently learned about that in the documentary. I do wonder if there's more going on. Do these sort of things happen in a bubble like that? Or would you suspect, and it's pure speculation, there isn't anything that's come out about this, but would you suspect that maybe there was other things going on with the kids and her that were not so healthy?
Yeah, it would not surprise me. And her ability to lie and role play and cover things up, we may never completely know. But yeah, nothing would surprise me at this point.
Should more charges, I don't know what the statute of limitations is, but now that we know this piece of it, should there be more charges brought against her for child abuse, or is it not enough to really go down that far of a road? I know you're not an attorney, but I'm just wondering if, you find this out, that someone did this. Now we're talking, this is in 2016, almost 10 years ago. Is that something, you would recommend if you had a client, or like if Keith was your client and he's saying these things to you, is that something you would recommend at this point? Or would you say, the kids would have to testify, all that would have to go down?
Right.
Is it worth going after this woman anymore? She's already not connected to Keith and the kids. Thank God. She's going to do her own thing now. Is it worth, digging that skeleton back up? Or is it better for everybody mentally just to go, it happened, we're okay now, let's just continue on with our lives?
Yeah, it's a hard call because it certainly may be better for the kids to not have to dredge up more. And yes, they would have to testify and certainly be interviewed. Excuse me.
Sure.
But it's better for Sherri, if we're looking at what would therapy for Sherri be, to have consequences. And the more consequences for her behavior, the better, because, it's clinically indicated that this lady has to start telling the truth
Mhm.
and she has to start facing, the consequences for her behavior. And if it could be proven that she hurt her children intentionally, then I would lean toward, well, number one, let's do what's right for the kids. But I would think it would be in her own best interest to have consequences.
And Sherri Papini, after being released, went to a halfway house, released a statement saying, I'm just paraphrasing here essentially, but it was something to the effect of, I'm going to, live the rest of my life trying to do good or make up for the damage that I've done, but never has truly apologized to Keith
No,
and the kids either, which
no.
is kind of spooky to me. After you do all
Mm.
of that, even if you have the disorder, which clearly she does, or many disorders, that you couldn't find some way. I mean, even if you know, like, you're never going to see your kids again and you got to do your own thing, just to put it out there of like, I am truly sorry for this.
Yes.
Then it goes down to the question of, is she capable of being
Right.
truly sorry? And is someone like
Right.
this capable of being sorry for their actions, no matter what consequences she faced? You were just talking about consequences and her facing consequences for her actions. She did go to prison for a little while, but does that resound with somebody with these sort of personality disorders? Is there any consequence that's great enough that can make a difference in them, or a dent to make them change their behavior?
Yeah, it certainly is questionable at this point, and it's another shocking thing that once this has all been exposed, that she's not contrite, that she's not owning it. And when we look at, can a person like this change? Well, we like to think so, but I would not be terribly optimistic at this point, just because of that. She's not showing remorse, and the amount of time she did in prison is something, but it wasn't for hurting her children, and that needs to be looked at and owned. It makes me think of something Carl Jung said that I've always loved: until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. And this lady does not seem conscious at this point of what she's done. And there's not remorse. And so, yeah, the odds are not good. If I had her as a client, it would be truth, 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 truth. We are not going to listen to any sob stories. We are not going to do victim signaling here. You are going to have to own the harm you've done, and you have to start in that place, and the person has to get there before they can do any kind of growth.
And would someone like that continue seeing you, though?
Probably
They
not.
would
It
be
would
like,
have to be
"I'm
court
out."
mandated.
Unless
Yeah.
court mandated, yes. But then,
Yeah.
even in those situations, I'm curious. Obviously, she's an extreme case, but when you have someone like that, and it is mandated, do you feel like you can ever make much headroom with someone with a disorder like that, or is it just kind of banging your head against a wall? And it's like, it is what it is. These people are not going to move. Can you think of any examples where someone has had disorders like this, where they have made some sort of recognizable difference to
Yeah.
those around them, not just to themselves a little bit, but to them around them, where it was actually meaningful, where they could live in some sort of a productive or a life with those that they love, and not be the monster that they seem to be?
I have seen people make progress. And again, it depends on the severity, and they've all been, for people like this, they have been court mandated, and it's been long term, sometimes 10 years in treatment because of the severity of the crimes, and they're out in the community now. And so they had to be heavily supervised, searches of their home. I mean, just to the point you were starting with, we are going to be looking at everything about you, and anytime there's a lie, you're going to be called on it. And when you have some kind of an intensive program like that goes on for years, I have seen people make some progress with gaining some awareness of what this was all about, why they were doing what they were doing, and to take ownership of it. And that was a big piece of treatment in that program, was you've got to take ownership of your distorted way of thinking, perceiving, and behaving, and you've got to make amends to people that you've hurt.
My question to that would be, are they truly making amends? Are they truly recognizing the behavior, or are they chameleoning themselves to fit the current mold, going, okay, well, this is the stage I'm on now, and this is the play I have no choice of being in, so I better play the role really well. And they're able to just kind of, to the outside, it looks like maybe there's something going on here, but truly on the inside, are they feeling those things? I mean, that's a question for them, but you see this far more than I do. Are they truly doing that, or are they just, again, like I said, chameleoning themselves for what's being asked of them or required of them?
Yeah, chameleoning themselves is a great term, and I think there's certainly a lot of that goes on. And so for some folks, particularly people who are psychopathic and highly manipulative, to be safe out in the world, they need basically to be supervised forever, because they can play the game when it's in their own best interest to play the game, and sometimes that's the best you can do with them. And it's the sad thing about these disorders that develop so early in childhood. The brain does hardwire that way. And it's not like, 6 or 8 weeks of talking to a counselor is going to change that. I mean, my God, Sherri had hours and hours and hours of therapy, and she was fooling her therapist with this victim stuff. And they were treating her for post-traumatic stress. That wasn't appropriate. That was not what was going on there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the points that was made in there was there was an incident where they were playing the Nintendo Wii, which is the remote control one where you swing it and such. And they were playing with friends at another house. It was all documented. And I guess Keith had swung his arm and his elbow and actually hit her in the eye. Complete accident. Friends witnessed this. It was not, she didn't get punched. It wasn't abuse. It was just a freak accident. But then she went and told some of her friends to get sympathy that she was being abused by her husband, who did truly love her and truly cared about her. Are people like that capable of feeling love, capable of feeling true, care from another, or empathy, or anything of that in that world? I mean, or is everything just very transactional in terms of you do this for me, I do this for you, and that makes me happy, and it's bizarre.
Yeah, exactly. It is all about what do they get out of the relationship. And if role playing the perfect wife earns them points and earns them attention, they'll do that. But when it's to their advantage to get more attention from being a victim and being, I was hit by my husband, then they'll go that direction. So it really is always about them. It's not an empathic connection with other people. And they use their kids in that same way.
There's a lot of people out there that are like this, and they don't always commit horrible crimes in terms of what we saw in this, or faking your abuse and all of that. But how do we as a society get ahead of any of this, or treat any of this before it gets to such an extreme? Because there are people that suffer in relationships where they discover further on, oh my God, look who I'm with. And they really played it really well. Then you're stuck in this trap. I've been there. I've been in relationships like that, where I feel like one step later, yes, you have too, where it's like it could have gone to this extreme. In some cases, it got pretty damn close. But when you're just trying to be a good human being and be a good partner, you kind of get blindsided. Then after it's done and they're out and you're on your own again, it's just the cycle continues, and somebody else is going to be the victim of these people.
Yeah.
And that's what I wonder with Sherri Papini. I mean, she's an attractive woman. And if somebody doesn't do their homework on this woman and look up what her story is, or doesn't understand what it is, she's just going to keep doing this in my summation of it. I mean, that's just who knows, hopefully not. But there's no rails for people like this. It's just like, okay, good luck, go out there, help people recognize it before you ruin their lives.
Exactly. I think we're trying to do a good job. We're trying, those of us who work in the psychological field, of educating the public keeping therapists tuned in because, if you went to school many years ago, this wasn't always well understood, decades in the past. I think we know more about it than we used to. But certainly there are more books out for the general public, and I can think of quite a few that I recommend to people. And, we just have to keep educating, and like your show, talking about it so people can learn more about the personality disorders and the way that people can present as a chameleon and, behave one way. But you always have to look at the behavior, not the words.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more psychology classes in high school where we address these things too.
I agree. If people could, I think there'd be nothing more valuable than more understanding of psychological conditions for young people, and less fluff, less stuff that we're never ever going to use in life. Let's understand the mind. Let's understand how we interact with one another. If somebody is watching this right now because they're like trying to figure out their own life and because people will Google this, people will find this, and it will be a resource. Give us some of the books. I know I have my list that I've gone through, but from you directly, what would be some of those that you'd say out to somebody who feels like, well, there's kind of some likenesses here with this case in my life, to kind of better understand this and get a better grip on what's going on in their world?
Yeah, one of my favorite authors right now is a lady named Sandra Brown, and I believe she has a website. You can just Google her, Sandra Brown Therapist. One of her books that I recommend to a lot of people. Now, the title is a bit misleading because it really goes into the cluster B personality disorders, but it's called Women Who Love Psychopaths. But it applies to men too.
Yeah.
But it's a very good book that she breaks down the narcissism, the histrionic, the psychopathic individual, and the way that very good-hearted people get manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
And, folks like this tend to latch on to people who have a lot of empathy, who tend to see the best in people who are well-meaning, and they get taken advantage of. And I certainly see Keith Papini as a person like that.
Yeah.
So, it's unfortunate it says women who love psychopaths because it applies to
everybody.
Everybody. But it's a very user-friendly book and very comprehensive. So that's by Sandra Brown.
That'd be a good one to check out. The documentary is on Hulu right now called Perfect Wife. Worth watching. If nothing else, just from a psychological standpoint, to see what some people are capable of. It's quite scary. The story of Sherri Papini back in the headlines again with a new documentary out on Hulu called Perfect Wife. This one from the perspective of her ex-husband. Her ex-husband who really stayed by her side until there was almost really no choice but to walk away. Joining me to discuss, Robin Dreeke, retired FBI special agent, chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. Let me just do a quick rundown for everybody, the cliff notes of this case. Sherri Papini disappears, reported missing November 2nd of 2016 after going out for a jog. She's missing for quite a while, many, many, many days, going into weeks. And eventually she shows back up on Thanksgiving Day on the side of the road, looking as if she's been kidnapped. And it was a pretty convincing looking kidnap, considering she was branded literally with a cottering iron. Also injuries, bruises. She had a story of being picked up by two Hispanic women and then being held in a bedroom for many, many days. Eventually, one of them having pity on her, according to her story, and then freeing her on the side of that highway. Her and her husband get back together, and they spend several more years together until the police and investigators eventually put the pieces together on this, and they realize this story is completely made up. There is no truth to it whatsoever. She eventually does admit to it. Gosh, if you tried to make this up for a Lifetime movie, they'd say, yeah, it's a bit much. What are your thoughts on just the overall of this? And then I want to talk about some of the charges that were levied against her. She's now free, and some of the revelations in this movie.
Yeah, I love when we get a new case pops up, because you're like, I haven't seen this one before. And then, so let's take a quick glance. The first thing that struck me was two Hispanic women. That's odd. Again, my first take when I'm looking at a new case that we're examining is they generally will fit some semblance of a pattern, even if it's a type of case like this that we hadn't really explored before. If you're looking at abduction in general, two Hispanic women is an outlier. That is, women abducting another woman is a real outlier. So that's the first thing. And the other thing that really struck me is then we look at behavior arcs, and for the statement of the ex-husband that said in the past, even when she's a little girl, so that behavior arc is anytime things have gotten tough, she ran away. Boom. Yeah. So the two women thing would have really alerted me right away as law enforcement, is that abducted by two women. What?
And then supposedly held by those two women the whole time. I mean, it was almost like, okay, sometimes you can see, sometimes there's, bait, if you will, that are going to come out there, make someone feel not threatened, and then pull them in. I know that does happen. We've seen it with, people like the names are escaping me the second I'm going to say them. Ghislaine Maxwell. She was, kind of one that was out there doing that for Jeffrey Epstein when it came to trafficking. But this is a bit different. I mean, I think the thought for a little while was that she was kidnapped and maybe gone into trafficking. But yeah, a big outlier right there. Ends up going to a former boyfriend's house, and literally he played along with her, which seemed insane to me. She literally had him shoot hockey pucks at her because he was a former hockey player to create some of these injuries. She had him hold up the hockey stick and such, and she would run into it to create injuries. He in the documentary claims, I didn't lay a hand on her. I just helped her do what she wanted to do. And he also then took a cottering iron that you'd use for like woodworking, and then cottered the word Exodus into the back, into her back. And it's there now. It's a permanent burn to really make this look real. I guess one of the questions I would have is, okay, you got somebody who is pretty much willing to do anything for this girl that he likes because they had a long ongoing relationship. Should there have been any charges pointed at him for participating in something like this? Or is he just, as kind of bewildered and part of this story as anybody else, and maybe just kind of not the brightest bulb to go along with it?
Well, I don't know the laws on this one, and it's going to vary from state to state, but there's generally laws and statutes for aiding and abetting. So I think whatever she gets ultimately charged with and is ultimately charged with.
Oh, she's been charged. She's out of jail now. She's free. She is. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, charges have come up. She's a free woman. She went to a halfway house.
She's paying restitution.
Doing restitution, all of that. Isn't part of her kid's life anymore. But there's that aspect of it, but there's the other aspect that I do wonder about that was brought up in that documentary, The Perfect Wife, talks about her children. And what Keith Papini, her ex-husband, reveals is pretty shocking. And it just touches on it at the very end, and I'm wondering if there's more to it. That talks about Sherri wanting the children to appear sick so she could take them to the doctor's office. And what she would do is get rubbing alcohol and have them inhale it. And then she'd take Kleenexes and such and put them in a Ziploc bag, tie it around their neck so the fumes continued to flow into them. And then when she took them to the doctor, they had symptoms of being ill. That's something she was never charged with in terms of child abuse or anything of that nature. I'm wondering if she needs to go back and if some of these charges, if some new charges need to be levied against her. I'm not trying to just keep kicking the person when they're down, but this is a pretty twisted human being that seems to have reps in being a twisted human being. I don't know that it's really going to change now that she's out.
What's that? And we covered it on another case, something by proxy.
A Munchausen by proxy. Yeah, I mean, that's really kind of what it starts to look like. Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you start saying it's a Munchausen by proxy syndrome, which needs a lot of therapy and counseling, and when you combine that with her, one of the reasons why people do these sensational things is because they don't feel they're getting enough attention, and they do it for notoriety, they do it for money, they'll do it for all these different things. So when you combine those two things together, you have a really, really unhealthy individual. Other charges on her, I don't know, but maybe court mandated therapy for one thing, and also removing the kids. Again,
Kids are removed.
I didn't see the special.
Yep, it's all the husband has the kids. They don't have anything to do with her right now. But yeah, I mean, something like this, that sort of behavioral arc of the attention, always trying to seek attention, because it very much sounds like this has been, she's needed it. She's always wanted it. She's never, well, I can't say she's never gotten it. She certainly has gotten it, but it's that by any means necessary to get it. That's a scary individual that's able to do very horrible things to oneself, which she did. But then if you have that little respect for yourself, it makes you wonder, what are you going to do to others, which we have seen some evidence in with the kids. Individuals like that, I mean, is there rehabilitating behavior like that?
Oh, that's a whole different question as well.
Yeah.
The cascading different effects, it's an interesting soup that she's created with herself, because at the same time, all these behaviors are exceptionally scary and potentially really threatening to others. At the same time, though, she has no problem solving ability, because she runs from her problems that she's been doing her entire life, hence run away, run away, run away.
Yeah.
So she runs away from problems instead of seeking vengeance against problems, because those are the ones that you typically are more scared about. She's using people as, I'm literally thinking this out loud, she's using people as tools to further her own insecurities and needs. And so she's not doing it out of retribution. So there's a less likely of violence against someone because of that. But in other words, she sees everyone around her as a tool and a screwdriver to serve herself. So I think if you remove her access to individuals that she can utilize as a tool and screwdriver in her own life and her own insecurities to bolster herself, it's probably going to be okay. But yeah, there's no fixing this. I mean, that's a toy that's been damaged severely. I don't think they can fix with duct tape.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting thing as her life continues to play out, who she surrounds herself with. And I think anybody would have to be very cautious to be in any sort of relationship with her, whether it's friend, romantic, going forward, just because, yeah, like these traits don't necessarily, they're not necessarily unlearned.
Well, and she's also extremely skilled at manipulation, obviously, because she got her ex-husband to do all these horrendous things at her behest. So that's another angle of her that I think, is part of this whole soup of her, is that she's, almost, again, it's probably apples and oranges, but, Lori Daybell is also extremely manipulative individual who didn't have a lot of empathy towards the people she was harming, like her children. So I think there's elements of that in there as well. So it's her, the scary thing about the manipulation side is, like, it's nice to say, hey, be careful of this individual because she can do X, Y, and Z, and everyone can say, oh yeah, I'll be fine, until you're surrounded in that circle of crazy, and all of a sudden you're sucked into the vortex, like her ex-husband was. But again, then we got to look at the ex-husband. What was going on in that guy's life that allowed him to get sucked into that? Sounds like there's some trauma bonding going on there as well, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bizarre relationship. I mean, it's one where, I think there was a lot going on behind his back that he was completely unaware of, and just, a lot of people that aren't in the crazy land, they get taken advantage of. An empathetic individual usually gets taken advantage of by someone with such a narcissistic tendency to their personality, which is clearly what this woman is or was. But it's fascinating. I do wonder. And I'm guessing back at home, just my speculation, there's probably a lot more that's being learned about what life was like with Sherri between the kids. And it's scary. It's just scary that there's people like that are out there. But
and it's probably extremely, I don't know, physically brutal, but brutal at least psychologically, because from the data points we have, there's not a lot of an ability to empathize with individuals that she has. I mean, it's edging up on, again, not being a licensed clinician, but there's a lot of psychopathic tendencies in there when dealing with others, which makes them very damaging.
From what Keith Papini has said, she's never apologized for any of this. Just kind of went along her way after, she knew she got caught, and followed those the recommendations of the court and the sentencing and all of that. But that's a scary, weird thing. Your family, your kids, you can't even apologize. I mean, just something like, even if you know you're going to stay away, but just to not have that is creepy. And she's got looks. That's what I think a lot of her thing, just like Lori Daybell, I think she trades on that quite heavily as well, which again, scary part for someone who's attracted to her, because you're going to go, oh, that's that happened a long time ago to somebody else. And then you're in the vortex suddenly.
And not realizing that you're dealing with someone with a very broken brain.
Yeah. And accepting that and knowing when to walk away.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.